Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at the very start of Santeri's move from Finland to China back in 2008, 2009.
Yeah, we've got his blog from that time and, his professional background to work with.
Exactly. And the idea is really to understand the motivations and the nuts and bolts of making such a big career and life change.
It's a really fascinating point in time to look at. And it's not just like one person's story, is it?
No, definitely not.
It sort of reflects these huge shifts in tech, in the global economy, things that were really picking up speed then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, when you think about someone moving abroad for work, maybe you picture someone fresh out of university. But Santeri's story, well, it starts with him already having quite a solid track record. He got his bachelor's in business IT in 2001.
Right.
And more importantly, from 2004 to 2007, he was an R&D line manager at Nokia. I mean, Nokia was the giant back then.
Oh, yeah. Huge.
And he was responsible for core Symbian communication middleware, stuff that was in, millions and millions of phones. So definitely not new to the industry.
And that's really key, I think. He was bringing significant management experience already, plus that deep technical knowledge, right? In a really central bit of mobile tech.
Yeah.
It wasn't like an entry-level gig.
Yeah.
It was clearly about using the expertise he already had, but on Nokia's global stage, a pretty high level.
And this new role in China, starting in 2008,
Yeah.
it wasn't just about coding either.
No.
He stepped into a project manager, maybe operative manager role. And the main job, transferring the S60 smartphone platforms, application layer maintenance,
Right.
moving that work to teams in China and India. So big management challenge, focusing on shifting operations.
And that application layer maintenance, maybe break that down a bit.
Sure. Basically, it's keeping the software that you, the user, actually see and interact with on your phone. Keeping it running smoothly, fixing bugs, updates, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And moving that whole process for a platform as massive as S60 was, well, it was a huge undertaking.
And think about the timing for a sec. 2008.
Yeah.
Nokia's Symbian S60 was still, top dog in smartphones. But the iPhone 3G had just come out.
Right. The game was changing.
Because Android was starting to make noise. So here's Santeri, tasked with optimizing the maintenance for this dominant platform, just as it's about to face, well, massive disruption. Makes you wonder, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, was Nokia, by focusing on transferring maintenance, maybe taking their eye off the ball a bit with new development? Or just underestimating how fast things were about to shift?
That's a really interesting perspective. It does feel like looking back at history now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Nokia, at their absolute peak, investing resource and moving maintenance for their main OS, just as iOS and Android were getting ready to completely rewrite the rules.
And he was right there in the middle of this huge company trying to, well, adapt, even if nobody really saw the full picture yet.
And then there's another layer entirely, this massive career move for him. It's happening right as the 2008 global financial crisis is really hitting hard.
Wow, yeah. Good point.
So you've got this personal opportunity, this big international step, but it's set against this backdrop of global economic chaos.
Really puts that risk versus opportunity calculation into sharp focus, doesn't it?
It does. And, well, clearly he weighed it all up. He decided to go for it.
Yep. Became final when he signed the contract. Nimi Paperian, as his blog puts it.
Name on the paper.
Exactly. And that contract itself, an international assignment contract.
Yeah.
That's a whole different beast compared to a standard domestic one.
Oh, absolutely. Way more complex. It has to cover so much more ground, especially for a move like Finland to China back then.
So what kind of things are we talking about?
Well, you'd definitely expect a relocation allowance.
Yeah.
For flights, shipping your stuff.
Good stuff, yeah.
Housing would be massive. Either the company provides a place or gives you a decent allowance to find one. Then there's international health insurance. Non-negotiable, really, when you're living abroad. And something maybe less obvious is tax equalization, making sure the different tax systems don't leave you worse off or, unfairly penalized.
Right, sorting out the differences between Finland and China's tax rules.
Yeah. And beyond that, just the pure admin.
Like visas.
Exactly. Nokia would have handled the whole complex visa and work permit process for him. You wouldn't expect an employee to navigate that alone.
No way.
And the contract probably also spelled out things like home leave, how often he could fly back to Finland.
Okay, so it's a pretty comprehensive package.
It has to be. It really highlights the kind of support structure you get with a big multinational like Nokia was.
They'd have a dedicated team for this, right? Global mobility or specialized HR?
Almost certainly. People whose whole job is managing these complex international moves. They'd be the experts, the main contact point. You couldn't really do it otherwise.
And often that support network extends even further, doesn't it? Especially on the ground.
You mean like local help?
Yeah, in China, particularly back then, local relocation consultants were probably involved.
Ah,
Oh,
right.
that's a
People
lot.
who help with the practical stuff once you arrive.
Exactly. Finding an apartment in Beijing or wherever he was based, setting up bank accounts, getting registered locally, maybe even basic language support. They're like crucial bridges.
Yeah. Helping connect the expat to the new reality on the ground. Makes sense.
And then there's the less formal side, too.
The expat community.
Yeah. Just connecting with others who've made a similar move, sharing tips, socializing, having people who just, get what you're going through.
That social network becomes incredibly important, doesn't it, for well-being, for just navigating everyday life.
Absolutely. So for Santeri, taking on this pretty demanding operational job, knowing all these support layers were there, both formal from Nokia and informal from the community.
It must have made the whole prospect seem a lot more manageable.
I think so. It shows how many pieces need to fall into place for a big international move to actually work smoothly.
Which brings us to something a bit more personal, he mentions.
Ah, the Firka Vaipalu.
Yeah. The informal Finnish HR question about salary.
Money or a pile of money?
It adds that little touch of humor, doesn't it? Amidst all the serious logistics.
It does. A reminder that there's a human making a life decision here.
Totally. And speaking of money, the wider economic context we touched on, that probably played a role too.
How so?
Well, in 2009, China's economy was still growing pretty strongly, relatively speaking, while Finland, like much of Europe, was feeling the effects of the financial crisis more acutely.
Ah, okay. So the move might have felt financially quite secure at that specific moment compared to staying put.
Potentially, yeah. Another factor in that complex decision-making process, how global trends can nudge individual choices.
And looking at his career path afterwards, his CV shows this 2008 move was really just the beginning of a pretty long stint in China.
Right. He stayed with Nokia and then Microsoft after the acquisition in significant roles right through until 2015.
Including things like leading product development for Lumia phones and innovation stuff.
Exactly. So this initial move, transferring S60 maintenance, it really positioned him right in the thick of things during that massive industry upheaval.
From Symbian to Windows Phone, the whole Nokia Microsoft deal.
Yeah. He was right there in China as it all unfolded.
Yeah.
You wonder if he had any inkling back in 2008 just how pivotal this move would turn out to be for his career.
It definitely gives you that long-term perspective on what might have seemed like, just the next career step at the time.
But before we jump too far ahead into what he did later, let's rewind a bit to the actual departure from Finland.
Right, the practicalities.
Yeah, the classic challenge, packing. His blog mentions the 40-kilogram and hand luggage limit.
Oh, yes. The universal expat dilemma.
Totally. How do you cram your life into that allowance?
Yeah.
Especially when you're moving for a demanding job in a completely different environment.
What do you prioritize? What absolutely has to come? What gets left behind? It's more than just physical packing, isn't it? It's mental, too.
Definitely. Figuring out essential work gear, clothes for a new climate, maybe a few personal things for comfort.
It's always trickier than it sounds.
Absolutely. And, as exciting as a new job abroad sounds, that whole period leading up to departure, it's just a whirlwind of admin, getting the visa sorted, the packing puzzle.
But as you mentioned, the admin burden doesn't just vanish the moment you get on the plane.
No, definitely not. Which leads into that later blog post title he used.
The Aimehän Lincoln jo rekisteroisinet.
Yeah. Oh, I was already registered. It hints at the next layer of bureaucracy waiting for him on arrival.
Right, the mandatory registrations in China.
Exactly. Expats usually had to register their address and visa status with the local public security bureau, basically, the police, very quickly.
How quickly?
Often within like 24 to 72 hours of arriving. Sometimes the immigration office, too.
Wow, so you arrive, probably jet-lagged, completely new place, and one of your first tasks is dealing with official bureaucracy in a system you don't know, possibly in a language you don't speak fluently.
Yeah. It sounds pretty stressful, doesn't it? Bit of a baptism by fire.
It really underlines that the whole admin side of moving internationally, it's ongoing. It doesn't stop at the departure gate. There are crucial steps right at the beginning, and usually more as you settle in.
So let's just sort of recap where we are. We've got Santeri, an experienced R&D manager from Nokia, making this big move to China in 2008. to manage a really key operational transfer for the S60 platform.
A challenging role, technically and managerially.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And it was backed up by this comprehensive international assignment contract, plus various support systems from Nokia itself, local consultants, the Expat network.
Right. He navigated the departure process, including that classic packing challenge,
Yeah, the 40-kilogram limit.
knowing that a whole new set of administrative tasks were waiting for him immediately upon arrival in China.
And all this playing out against that backdrop of, massive change in the mobile world and global economic wobbles.
It really paints a picture of how many factors are in play with a move like this. Personal, professional, logistical, economic.
Indeed. And it sets the stage perfectly for our next discussion, doesn't it? Where we'll dig into his actual experiences on the ground. What was it really like?
Yeah, looking forward to that.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the very beginning of Santuri's China journey. We've touched on his background, the reasons for the move, those crucial support systems, and the wider context. Hopefully it gives a good sense of the complexity involved.
We hope so. And if you found this interesting, definitely subscribe so you catch our next deep dive. We'll be getting into those on-the-ground experiences in China.
Thanks again for sharing your insights.
My pleasure, and thanks everyone for listening.
And just a final thought to leave you with. Thinking about Santuri navigating that huge tech shift back then, maybe reflect on the rapid changes happening across industries today. What can we learn from his kind of proactive decision-making? And maybe the sheer importance of adaptability when things feel uncertain in our own careers or lives? Something to mull over?
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at the very start of Santuri's